Ah, Pokemon, a game of diversity, balance, and diversity. Yet even with all of this, there are just a few Pokemon that are stronger or weaker than others, which is why I'm doing a video on the top 10 Pokemon that need nerfs or buffs in Pokemon. Now, this video did take a very long time, so please buff that like bar if you liked it, or nerf that like bar if you disliked it. It was a very crazy video to make, so let's get this video started with number 10, Garchomp needs a nerf. Now, Garchomp on the Pokemon Global Link is currently the most used Pokemon in singles, and it's pretty much always been that way. Even back in the 5th generation, 4th generation, Garchomp is one of the most commonly used Pokemon ever, and while I don't think it's necessarily overpowered or way too strong, it's just way too reliable, and its hidden ability doesn't help that. It has the rough skin ability, so that just makes the annoying Pokemon it is even more annoying, which makes people want to play it even more. I think the first thing that needs to be done about Garchomp is Game Freak needs to give rough skin the MyB, and try to fix it with something else. It's not necessarily going to improve Garchomp's power. At least give an option to where rough skin isn't the better choice 100% of the time, and that way you can have Sand Veil or this other ability that doesn't necessarily buff its power too much, and that could be pretty good. Another problem with Garchomp is that it is a pseudo-legendary Pokemon, so we can't really toggle with the base stats too much because it has to have that 600, and even special Garchomp is somewhat threatening. If you knocked it down to like 99 base speed, that would make a world of difference because now it's not edging out 100 base speed Pokemon, it's being edged out by them, but it's still going to be very used and very strong at the same time. So Garchomp, not overwhelmingly powerful, just needs a little bit of nerfs right there, and then it can be a pretty healthy Pokemon. Alright, number 9 is going to be Tropius, and of course it's going to need a buff. Now, the reason why I put Tropius on this list is because it has a lot of really awesome options for getting a really cool defensive buff or a really cool offensive buff. Defensively, Tropius has Harvest, which is amazing on a lot of Pokemon, and it also has Synthesis, so it has its own forms of Sustain. Even gets access to Curse if you want to play a defensive game as well, but offensively, it has a lot as well. It gets Dragon Dance. How many people watching this video actually knew that Tropius gets Dragon Dance? Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And if you're playing in the Sun, you have Chlorophyll and Growth, or even Solar Power. In Sun, Growth is going to give you +2 special attack and +2 attack, so you can go to a mixed attack standpoint and whatnot, and it's going to be really nice. And we can even play around with the stats in different ways. Now, offensively, I was thinking we could actually Mega Evolve Tropius, because that way we could keep the Chlorophyll ability, and that's going to give us a lot of Sun dynamics, either in doubles or singles. That if you want to have a single Pokemon set up a Sunny Day with a Heat Rock and then go into Tropius at some point, you can give it a good amount of speed. +30 to that speed, going to be really nice, going to make it to where now it's actually going to be competitive on a high speed tier. Or even then, if you don't have Sun Up, you can set up a Dragon Dance and still have a good amount of speed. Defensively, it's a bit trickier because it's already fairly defensive that, just giving a slight buff to its defenses could make it viable. Now, the biggest problem about Tropius is going to be those weaknesses, though. Has way too many weaknesses to be tanky, so if it gets an evolution or a super defensive overhaul, it might be able to survive all those super effective attacks. Its whole design is actually holding it back in this case, so it does make it tricky to work around with, which is why we could either go for like huge defensive retuning, like not even the 6, 10, 14, just keep going for that, or give it the evolution and give it a justifiable reason as to why you're making this Pokemon so ungodly tanky, but at the same time has a ton of weaknesses, so it should balance out and make the Pokemon not way too strong. So now let's get on to number 8, Landorus. Needs a nerf. So this is going to be Therian Form Landorus, and one thing about it is that it also has the same problems as Garchomp. It's not necessarily overpowered, it's just overly reliable. So with that, it also has 600 base stat total, so that means we just can't rip away stats. We have to retune it and try to keep it in a pretty healthy way. So I think one of the biggest problems with Landorus is Intimidate. We get rid of that ability, and it's not going to completely gut the Pokemon. The idea behind a nerf is you don't want to make the Pokemon unusable, you just want to balance it. These are balance changes, and with getting rid of Intimidate, still makes it where the Pokemon has a good amount of power. Another thing that could be done, since we have to kind of mix the stats around, is just boosting its speed. If most Landorus are running Scarfed anyways, well, if we just keep going heavy on those outspeeds, it doesn't matter if you keep outspeeding because you already have the Scarf, and it does kind of add to that play on the Scarf. Also, by buffing its speed, that kind of takes it away to where we don't need to run Scarf every time. We can run a Life Orb. We can have that other item option that makes up for cutting out the attack. So we can maybe remove 15 to 20 points on its attack. That could be made up a lot by Life Orb, putting 5 of those or 10 of those in the speed, the rest in the special attack. Now it's not really gaining too much from the special attack. You might see an off special attack set, and it gains some power back from removing the Intimidate, So again, it's a pretty solid balance, but a nerf overall just to bring Landorus in line with all of other Pokemon because it's just too darn reliable. Get rid of that utility, slight amounts of power depending on the item changes, and then we're good to go. Alright, number 7 is going to be Greninja. And Greninja needs a buff, honestly, that when we look at it, we're still in a very stat total gated position though, because a lot of other starter Pokemon, they don't go above 535 on a base stat total, and Greninja is going to have its stats at 530 as well. Now, Greninja's current problem is that it's made of glass. You slap a life orb onto it, and things are going to get pretty bad for it because it's losing even more health every time it attacks, and then it's just way too frail. Also, Greninja's current attack state means that it has to hit a super effective hit, or it has to 2-hit KO the opponent, and most of the time the opponent's just going to one-shot it back with a very solid neutral hit, or a somewhat predictable special attack. So I was thinking is what we could do is remove 15 points from its attack. Now, Greninja does also gain from being a mixed attacker. However, I chose removing 15 on that attack as a very specific amount, because Greninja will still be able to one-shot most fairy-type Pokemon with a gunk shot. So you can run the naive nature like with very low attack investment with a gunk shot, and then that means it's still going to be able to be powerful. Also, it removes the power of a mixed Greninja set, which can run away with the battle in some situations. So that means you have to put more attack investment, take away from the special attack, but you give it defenses in trade. My idea with Greninja is that it's really good at just kind of dealing with metagame threats. That if you just put it on a team, it kind of keeps everything in balance. So I'd rather buff Greninja, make it just a bit more common, bit more powerful, but at the same time make it to where a lot of other threats have a hard time. Greninja has very powerful moveset coverage with a fast Ice Beam, a fast water type attack, or even like Dark Pulse and stab anything that it wants to. So I feel that it's actually a really good catalyst for keeping the game balanced. Therefore, buffing it to not being as frail, as risky, could be very healthy for the game overall. Number 6, Pangoro. You saw it in the thumbnail. It's going to need a buff, and it's going to need a speed buff, if anything. Right now, if you Scarf a Pangoro, it's going to have effectively 111 base speed. That's nothing. That means you lose your item for 111 base speed, which a lot of Pokemon outspeed. It just needs a massive speed buff. So I was thinking is we just buff the speed by 20. That's going to put us in a really good range. And I was thinking we could actually make it very comparable to Excadrill stats. We bring in line with Excadrill stats, but we also have the different coverage, and then we also have our own abilities, so Pangoro can work in that kind of way. It's going to be bulky, it can be kind of fast when given the right support or items, and then it's going to be able to actually do something, because Pangoro right now, it has so much potential. The movesets on this guy, it's unreal how much great coverage Pangoro gets. It'll be able to find a lot of the super effective hits, it'll be able to find a lot of the game-changing moves, but right now it's just too slow, so it takes too much damage too fast, and it can't really swing a battle. You give it some more speed or even agility. What you could maybe do is instead of buffing its speed or offenses directly, you buff the defenses just a little. That way it can survive to do an agility. Now it's outspeeding and now it's putting out good damage as long as it has a super effective hits. So effectively turning it into a physical Greninja with one turn of setup. I think that that's actually pretty healthy and pretty awesome to do. Now, one thing about Pangoro is that its attack is also kind of low. Ursaring has more attack than it, and when you look at the ferocity of Pangoro, it doesn't really match up. So buffing its attack, making it a better Scarf Pokemon, or giving it another speed option is really the way to go with Pangoro, and a Mega Evolution could be pretty awesome as well. But Pangoro definitely needs a buff. Lot of wasted potential here, and I want to see more from the amazing panda Pokemon. Next up we have Scald. Needs a huge, massive nerf. 30% burn, that is too damn high, and all it does is just turn the game into a dice roll that just clouds out Surf. That Surf is a respectable move. 90 base power, potential stab, yeah, that's going to hit pretty well, but it's just completely unviable with something like Scald running around. Slightly less base power, and then a 30% chance to change the game. You get that 30% chance on the first usage of Scald on a physical Pokemon, your opponent is screwed by that, and that's just way too much. So there are a couple of things that you can do. Keep the same base power, but knock it down to 10% burn. Maybe up it to 85% base power, because that's going to bring in line with Thunderbolt and Flamethrower, but those aren't like directly elemental, so I don't want to push it up to 90 base power, because then that keeps Surf absolutely unviable. So this gives you a bit of a change. Do you want the 10 more power, or do you want the 10% burn? So this is going to make it to where it's not as toxic to the competitive environment just to spam burn until you win off of that 30% chance. Another thing that we could do is just cut its power. Cut the power down to like 60 and then give it a 20% chance to burn. That way you're not playing it for the offenses, because Scald is so powerful right now, you can just play it as an offensive move. A super effective Scald can one-hit KO, or just a neutral Scald can two-hit KO in a lot of situations where stab is involved, and you're not even worried about the burn at that case, but at the same time, if Scald isn't finding those KOs, you're just fishing for that burn, and eventually you're going to find it and change your opponent's entire game. So knocking it down to that 60 base power puts it on that, okay, are you using this to sweep, or are you using this for the burn? Because it's too powerful doing both of them. Massive nerf to Scald, it'll make the game a much better place, and it'll just kind of mix things up in a very good way, and it won't turn the game into a massive RNG fest. Alright, number 4, Mega Aerodactyl. Needs a buff. I think Mega Aerodactyl is a very amazing Pokemon with high amounts of potential, great amount of speed, great amount of attack, yet it's just missing ever so slightly some kind of damage or something. It does have to deal with quite a few super effective hits that are fairly common, which is a big problem for Aerodactyl as well, so giving it defenses on the Mega Evolution wasn't really a good call. Just cut out the defensive gain, cut out some of the special attack gain, and then pump it into the attack. 150 speed. That is more than enough, but giving it like 150 attack, 155 attack, that'll change some of those situations where you're finding a super effective hit that's getting boosted by those tough claws, that's finding a KO, because Aerodactyl needs that KO more than anything. So what you're doing is you're playing it as that coverage sweeper. As long as it's finding the super effective KO, or as long as it's coming into the later game and sweeping half health Pokemon, it'll be able to make that happen. Right now, just ever so slightly underpowered. Like, it just needs a couple points of attack to make it viable, and not necessarily brutally overpowered, or at least something to put it on people's radar. It'll be a Pokemon that people might consider, and that could be pretty cool for Mega Aerodactyl, which I think is a very, very amazing Pokemon. Like, if it gets more representation, that could mean a lot of really cool things, just for expanding diversity, and having a good Pokemon out on the battle more often. Okay, so now we're getting to the serious part of the list. It's number 3, it's Mega Kangaskhan, and of course it needs to be buffed. No, I'm just screwing with you guys. Mega Kangaskhan needs a nerf. Now, personally, I don't think Mega Kangaskhan is strong in like a super overpowered sense. It's just better than a lot of the other Mega options in a lot of different scenarios that you just kind of throw it out there. It's a normal type Pokemon. It doesn't have to worry about getting hit by crazy super effective hits. It also has utility. Fake Out is going to be what's making it strong in doubles. Having that Scrappy gives you other options to play around that don't just force a Mega, and then it can set up power-up punches if you bring it in as a proper revenge Pokemon. They don't deal with your Mega, that's a free +2 attack, and now you just get to roll everything. It is kind of held back by its stats just a bit, like that's the only thing keeping it in check is the 100 base speed. If it had more than that, it'd be GG for days, forever, and then it would be absolutely overpowered. But right now, I think it's just a little too powerful, so we should make it to where Parental Bond, instead of doing 50% more damage on that second hit, just does 25% more damage. I mean, if you look at that little baby Pokemon, it shouldn't be hurting that much. Like a 125 base power getting cut in half. No, it is not that powerful. So realistically, we could get away with making it do a quarter of the damage and maybe just one boost only. Now, I want to use one boost only as very specific language because that's only going to apply for Power-Up Punch, but you can still use other moves that'll apply other kinds of effects. So Dizzy Punch. People like using Dizzy Punch. It's very low usage, but it gives that chance to confuse. Using Thunder, using elemental attacks on a special Kangaskhan, which does exist, you know, it's going to make it to where you do have those double chances. Rock Slide, double chance to flinch kind of idea, but at least making it to where you're not getting a free Swords Dance every time you attack, probably really good. Now that's going to be fairly nerfing, so what I was thinking is we could remove 5 to 10 points off the special attack and then put those into the attack of Kangaskhan. Or we could also take points from the defenses. Take 5 points out of defense, 5 points out of special defense, maybe 5 to 10 from each, put that into the special attack. So now with the special attack in Kangaskhan slightly more viable, and then we can put the rest into attacks. In theory, this should balance it pretty well and not make it the only choice to use ever as a Pokemon, and then we'll see more Mega diversity, and then everything will be nice and healthy. Okay, so with number 2, I'm not even wasting your time. Stealth Rock needs a massive, massive nerf. This is just a not fun or healthy move at all because it just makes it to where, alright, we're doing a Stealth Rocks war and then we just have that control the entire game because what happens is 2 Ferrothorn need to enter the field, set up Stealth Rocks, and then whichever team is not fit, not tanky enough, or has too much rock weakness, that team's just going to lose eventually by forcing switches and just making an annoying game. You're playing Stealth Rocks and not the game of Pokemon, and that doesn't take skill, that isn't fun, that's enjoyable, it's just very unhealthy to the game. So now we have to think about what we do to Stealth Rocks. Now, I'm in favor of absolutely just gutting it from the game, removing it, deleting it. It never existed. But at the same time, Game Freak has stated they don't want to remove any implemented moves or Pokemon or abilities from the game, so make it like weather. That way it's not on the field permanently until you're forced to use like Rapid Spin or something. There's abilities that clear up weather. In the 6th generation, Game Freak even nerfed weather, so why not do it with Stealth Rock? Just make it to where it's on the field for 5 turns. So making it to where you have to keep refreshing it would probably be the best way of balancing it. It doesn't completely gut it as a move, even though I'd want it absolutely destroyed, but I think that this could be a pretty fair way of making it work, and it works with how Game Freak has balanced other kind of field conditions in the past. So I think that's the way to go. And now it's time for honorable mentions. So before we get to number 1, Bronzong needs a buff. It got hurt way too much by the Steel nerf. So now I was thinking you just give it the filter ability. That would help it out so much because now it has those weaknesses that its abilities don't cover for. It used to be Schrodinger's Pokemon that you didn't know if it was going to be immune to your Earthquake or if it was going to be resisted to your Fire type attack, or at least neutral on a Flamethrower or something. So giving it filter kind of balances it out for Steel types no longer resisting Dark and Ghost. Smeargle, way too diverse of a Pokemon. It's just kind of really running wild in VGC 2016, and it's always been a Pokemon that gets to do too many things. Give it 3 moves. Make it to where it can only know Sketch 3 times. Make it 3 moveset Pokemon. It'll be a lot more dynamic, a little more predictable, and that should make it to where it can be pretty healthy at the same time. And then we have Mega Lucario for a tuning. I was thinking that Mega Lucario is just too frail right now. We don't see it in 6v6 too often because it is a liability, but at the same time, if we buff its damage numbers or if we buff its defenses too much, it could still run away because that adaptability is really strong. So maybe what we could do, remove adaptability, find a different, give it inner focus, I guess, because that way it won't be able to get gimmicked out by flinches too much. There's probably another ability that could work out, but in that case, we could buff its defenses, we could buff its attack, we can maybe just kind of dance around with the special attack a bit more, and then we can also apply that to Lucario. We buff Lucario's base stats, and then we can make it to where the Mega Evolve stats carry over, maybe they're balanced a bit more, and then Lucario, it won't be as potentially unhealthy because it's either absolutely useless or absolutely dominating, and we can just kind of shrink that together and make it a really solid Pokemon. And now it's time for the number 1 Pokemon on this list. Castform needs a buff. So as you guys scratch your head and think, why Castform? I want to make a little note about this whole list. The reason why I did the list the way I did is I kind of covered everything. You know, Tropius, it's a random Pokemon thrown on this list, but it's a really big eye-opener, I think, that if it just gets a little bit of a buff or something, it can actually become a really amazing Pokemon. But then there's also a lot of Pokemon and potentially moves that need nerfs. So I kind of covered what needs to be buffed where and how, and what needs to be nerfed where and how, and it just kind of shows that, yeah, there's a lot of sleeper Pokemon out there, and I can't remember them all. There's like 400 Pokemon that are competitively viable, that are like fully evolved, or at least somewhat usable in some form. So we could talk about each individual one needing a nerf or a buff, and it's just really hard to do that because the game's so diverse and there's a lot of differing opinions. So I try to play a pretty good list that covers everything. But it comes to Castform, Rain Form is amazing because you're going to have Thunder. That move can't miss in Rain. Hurricane can't miss in Rain. Weather Ball, going to get boosted to 100 base power, also gets Stab, and also will have the Rain boosted effect. So this Pokemon has a ton of rain damage and crazy potential, but its stats are holding it back. Also, I mean, Hail Castform, same idea. Weather Ball gets pretty nice. We also have Blizzard. It can hit both opponents. Now, the Sunny Day Castform kind of falls behind, but even then, 100 base power, Stab, Sun boosted Fire type attack, not bad at all. But Castform stats, oh, these are terrible. 70 across the board. It doesn't do anything. It gets outsped, it gets blown up easily, it doesn't do damage. So what I was thinking is we could either Mega Evolve it and just give it plus 50 to speed, plus 50 to special attack, and then make it work as a really hard weather Pokemon. It has to make some decisions too. Is it going to be the sweeper in that rain? That it is your Mega Pokemon. You only get 1 per battle, so you might have to make it your Castform, and if you're doing that, then it should be the sweeper. You have another Pokemon, bring Drizzle, bring a Rain Dance, do something for it, and then Castform just goes for some Mega Sweeping. Also, it gives some opportunities for Hail and stuff. You set up a Hail, that Blizzard is going to be pretty awesome, and there's just a lot of cool opportunities here. Or even just changing Forecast. Make it to where if Forecast is in effect, have it gain 1.25, maybe 1.3 times speed and special attack, and now Castform will actually be able to do something. You get to keep its cool base stats. I like how everything is a flat 70. I mean, it looks pretty nice and it makes a lot of sense for just balance inside of the gameplay, but if you get the weather, then this Pokemon takes off and becomes awesome. That's what I want to see because it has a lot of cool things going for it with the Weather Ball. The Rain Castform is absolutely devastating, but we'll never see that power without some kind of boost to its speed and damage. And if we get that, then Castform might actually be an OP Pokemon, and that'd be one of the coolest things ever in my opinion. So if you guys enjoyed this video about Pokemon that need buffs, nerfs, and all sorts of crazy things going on, and I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for watching.